The book of Ecclesiastes tells us there is a time to tear down and a time to build. In the life of Sam Hinn, senior pastor of the Gathering Place in Sanford, Florida, the year 2013 was the realization of the beginning of that process, not of bricks and mortar, but of spirit and soul. We recently sat down to talk with Pastor Sam Hinn, but first, here are his own words from a Facebook post earlier this year of 2015.
For me, it was between that rock and hard place that my life became so transparent and authentic. You know your past, you know the story, you know the good, the bad, the lame, the blame, and you know the parts that might live better hidden under a rock. All those broken pieces, you know what they are. Yes, those broken pieces of your story that you're not proud of. Those pieces of your story that you're still coming to terms with. Those pieces of your story that hurt you, hurt others, and you're not sure what to do with them. God will use those broken pieces of your story to help people who have been silent about their story.
Pastor Sam, the media has done its share of reporting the story. What is your story?
It's the story of redemption. It's the story of brokenness. It's the story of truth, authenticity. It's the story of freedom. And I guess in the end, it's the story of victory. Because God can take what is seemingly so painful and bring life out of it, bring hope. And not just hope to me, but hope to others who may have experienced the same depth of pain. And I guess maybe for me right now to start is to say to everyone that I've hurt, that I've disappointed. Because some people haven't heard me say this, even though I've said it. I publicly apologized and repented. But for anyone that's not heard this, this is for you, to tell you how deeply sorry I am for letting you down, for hurting you, for disappointing you. And I had so many people, different people say, not so many, but different people say, you betrayed us, or we felt betrayed. The one that I betrayed was the one that I made a covenant with. I betrayed my wife. And my freedom came in when she forgave me. I disappointed people. I hurt people by my actions. But I never betrayed anyone because I never made a covenant with them or ever promised that I'd be perfect. So when she forgave me, when my kids forgave me, that was the greatest freedom I've ever experienced.
The process of one day at a time.
And the rest of it, it's a process. It really is a process. And learn that early on in our restoration process is that you just live for the day. I couldn't look a year down the road. Today, get through today. I think scandal sells. So the media did its job, even the Christian media. But the truth is, they didn't know the full story. And there was a lot of emotion, and I think it was very personal. But it's okay. It's if that's what they had to do to deal with it, it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is how I deal with it, how I deal with the things that were written. It was painful because I think the church does the best at shooting its wounded. The church does not know how to restore leaders. And so you would think that the people that you've reached out to, you've helped, would in turn help you back. I think that's the most disappointing thing for me in the process. Look, I know what happened. I know what I did. I know how painful. And if somebody had to pick up a stone and throw it, that's fine. And I actually encourage people, go ahead and do that, because if that brings your healing, that matters to me. You being healed of whatever happened is important. The sad part is I thought as believers we're supposed to reach out to one another. We're supposed to pray for one another, encourage one another, bear one another's burdens, lift one another up. What I learned is the ones that held me at the highest pedestal, put me on the highest pedestal, were the ones that kicked me the hardest when I was down. I don't blame them. I really don't. It's just how they came to terms with their disappointment.
Perhaps you're wondering why this interview.
I've had opportunity to do this interview, this first interview, with other outlets, but I wanted to do it with two people that I've known for a long time and worked with for a long time. And I just want to thank you for extending such grace and such kindness and making me feel comfortable enough that I can talk about it, to you both, and let people know that the only reason I'm doing this, I don't need any more media coverage. What I care about is that if my story can help one more person, one pastor not make the mistake that I made, then it's worth it. It's worth it to go public and let it go and let people talk about it, even if it's negative. If it heals one, if it causes one to rethink their decision, then it's worth it. So I appreciate you guys giving me this opportunity.
What were the vulnerabilities? What do people need to be on guard for?
Great question. If you would have talked to me about vulnerability before, I honestly wouldn't know what you're talking about when in the height of our success or my success. Because vulnerability isn't talked about, but now it seems like vulnerability is the new strong. Everybody's talking about transparency, everybody's talking about vulnerability. But for me, in the pain of what happened, in the pain of my brokenness, came the greatest freedom I've ever experienced in my life. Because I ended up dealing with me and not the hype of all the success and all the people and all the staff and everybody. It's when people are putting you up on a pedestal, which the church is really guilty of, and so am I, because I look at leaders that I love and honor and esteem, and you continue to do that, but never ever lift them up, put them up in a place that they don't belong. And so what that does is it feeds their ego. It feeds because I think a lot of leaders are looking for validation. And so one of the things that I learned in this process after everything happened is, accountability is good, but if you don't have vulnerability, you're in a dangerous place. Because, smite the shepherd, the sheep scatter. The enemy knows how to smite the shepherds. And so when you have 1,500 to 1,700 pastors leaving the pulpit every single month, what's the church going to look like in 10 years? And the primary reasons that they're leaving is either the financial stress that's on them. This is a George Barna Schaefer Institute, a study that's been done for a long time. Financial pressure, burnout, moral failure. So what's the church going to look like 10 years from now if this trend continues? We're seeing an epidemic with pastors committing suicide. We don't know how to deal with that, because the church has put pastors up at a place and a pedestal and a platform that they're human. They're just no different than anyone else in their churches. We hold them to a higher standard, and we should. But for me, my freedom came when I was able to talk about my story and share my story for the first time without shame. So vulnerability for me changed my life, because vulnerability allows me to open myself and my heart up, so that if it helps one other person. But I don't think there's anywhere near enough vulnerability and transparency and authenticity, to sit down with another leader and to openly just talk to each other one-on-one and say, okay, so tell me, and this is a part of my approach now when I work with leaders, talk to leaders, so tell me something that only you and God know. And I don't want to hear about how the altar call was, how many people got saved, how many people came to the church, how many people attended the call. Well, you know, I got 1,200 people in my church. You know what? You could lose those 1,200 people, as I learned, very quick. It's not about how many people you have. It's who can you be open with about your struggles. And when you hide your struggles, your sin will find you out. Take that to the bank.
Okay, which takes me to the question about the people that surround you. You talked about people putting you up on a pedestal. How?
And I let them do that. So it's not like they're guilty without me being
Sure.
a part of this, you know, playing into it. So
Pastor Sam, are people around a person in position such as yourself, are those people supposed to confront? What is the responsibility of those people? Do they confront you when they find a flaw, when they find something, a struggle going on? Did you, in your case, was there condoning? Was there confrontation?
no, there was no condoning because nobody knew. There was no confrontation because nobody knew. And when you do confront in love. Again, I don't blame anybody. I blame no one but myself. I take absolute responsibility. And did right from the beginning, because it was no one else's problem but mine. The thing that I didn't know is how powerful shame is. Because once you're in it and I don't care what the sin is or what the story is, once you're in it, it's like being in the middle of a forest. You can't see your way out. And so once you're in it, you actually start believing things and you become deceived.
Proverbs 9:10 tells us the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
You can blame the devil and you can say, you know, and of course we know that in the end, that's where it is. But you still have to take responsibility for allowing yourself to be deceived. So I hid it really well because I was so worried about the outcome, the response, the result. And at the core of all of that was pride. I don't think others will say that, but I will. Because you're trying to protect something as if somehow you have the power to protect it. It's God. You can't be God. And pride has this way of, I need to protect my reputation. I need to protect the work of God. I don't want to bring a reproach against God's kingdom. And all those are honest, but it's pride. Because somehow you're going to protect rather than God. So to answer your question, there was no condoning because no one knew. There was no confronting because no one knew. And the way it was confronted, I'm very grateful for. I actually cried out to the Lord. If this is the only way to confront it, then confront it. Everything that I dreaded, Job said, came on me. And that's, I think, that's life. Everything that I dreaded, everything that I thought, I don't want this to happen, everything that I dreaded happened exactly as I feared.
You bring up fear. What was the greatest fear, and was there fear of God?
Absolutely. There was fear of God. Whew. Fear of God was every day. Because nobody wants their sin exposed. And it's really easy to sit behind a desk or sit behind a computer and write an article. And the truth is, we all deal with sin. All of us have issues that God is doing and working through our life. And so nobody wants their story, in the media and people talking about and all the anger and, and I didn't read them because I was trying to save my life, and people didn't know the battle with depression and suicide and shame and guilt. But fear of God was every day. My greatest fear is that he would lift his hand off me. And this is how ironic it is, the most powerful service I've had in years was the Sunday before, the Monday when everything hit. By far, I was teaching on the story of Ruth, pursued by grace. And the presence of God was so intense. I stayed probably an hour and a half after and just laid hands on people and cried. And it was the most gracious moment. That was Sunday. And then Monday was when everything hit the fan.
In part 2, Pastor Sam Hinn talks about the darkest of times.
The darkest time was probably a year long. The suicidal thoughts, the suicidal attempt.
And those who brought light and love.
When these guys put their arms around me and assured me that everything would be okay, and her, even in her crisis, she put helping me first.